Hello, Dave.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing fine.
I'm doing great. How are you? How you doing?
Can you hear me well?
I can hear you. Yeah, great. Wonderful. Very
Okay.
good. Yeah.
So I was introducing you to the readers and the people here, and of course, we've been doing this interview for a while now, but I
hmm
think people will be interested in knowing about your current endeavors. You just came back from Nashville, where you were recording with Megadeth, the new record. So I'd like to know about that. How's the whole thing going? Is the album completely finished at this point? If you have any sort of time frame in mind at this point, given how things are.
No, definitely. The album is definitely not done. They go in. I'm actually working on trying to get a light on here. Let me see if I can get a light a little better in my face. I don't know. It's kind of, I'm facing a window right here.
I did buy one.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it funny, all the technology we now have? It's like between lights and, this funny stuff with COVID has helped us set up like many facets of our studios. No, recording happens in various stages. First the basic tracks, which for us is bass and drums, and then the rhythm guitars, and then starting to put some vocals down and solos and all the embellishments of, the extra guitars and whatever, layers of melody and stuff. So the first thing we wanted to get done was drums and bass. So me and Dirk, we're working on that this last week, and just, great. So, look, it's underway. I think that's the good news now is the album is officially underway. We've been writing it since really early, kind of late 2017. Our last show was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, back in November of 2017. And then the intention from there was just to get started composing. So it's on its way. The ship is sailing, so which is great.
So Dystopia was a really great Megadeth record. It was very up to level, with what people expect from the band. Because sometimes, as you know, bands go through different periods and they do weird things. Of course, Megadeth had its share of that, with Risk in the late 90s. But
Right.
when people turn to Megadeth these days, they want to hear a very precise thing, which is old school thrash metal. So is that sometimes a factor in the writing? You write for what the people expect you to listen. Is there anything that's off limits? There's a certain song or idea that you say, nah, this is not fitting for a Megadeth record.
Yeah. The answer is yes to everything you said. Look, there's a saying, you have your whole life to write your first record, and then you have about a year to write your second one. Yeah. Once you put the first one out, the die is cast. Now there is a sort of a sound that people expect, when they hear the next record. And if album 2 is too much of a departure, people go, that's kind of weird. I like the first one better, And I think, with Megadeth, look, this is album 16. So we have a lot of experience doing this. We've been able to expand and try a lot of different things. We can, we've had an opportunity, look, there's been some missteps, of course, but, you have to also, in our opinion, you have to be bold and be adventurous and try some new things. If you just do what you always did, it's like, why put out another album? Everyone can just go buy the previous one, So, there's, you're dealing with the creative, there's business and there's marketing and all this stuff. But, first, music business, we're dealing with music. The business always comes after the music. So I think for us, what we find is that when we're in a room and we're playing something, and if we're all going, that's freaking awesome. If we like it, chances are you're all going to like
it. So this past November marked the 25th anniversary of Euthanasia coming out. So I'd like to know, how do you view that record, with the 25 years on your back? How do you remember the recordings? Of course, the Megadeth of 1994 were a bit more difficult than the Megadeth of 2020, I guess. So how do you remember that whole process, and how do you view that album 25 years later?
Well, so I'm talking to you from my house here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I moved to Scottsdale in 1993. Me and Dave moved here first, then Marty moved. Some of our crew and various people moved out here as well. And it's funny, that started from a conversation we had in Barcelona as we were driving down Las Ramblas to go to our hotel. The conversation somehow came up about, I think it's time to get out of LA, which is where we were living at the time, and through the 80s and the early 90s, for a couple of early 90s. And somehow me and Dave and Marty all agreed on moving to Phoenix, right? So that kind of started the mindset of it. And so we moved here, and then we wanted to make a record here, and that set in motion a whole other thing. For initially our producer Max Norman, we were looking at houses. There's a lot of big beautiful houses, and a lot of these Frank Lloyd Wright type of houses, where they're sort of built around the natural landscape. And as much as a lot of these houses were great, a lot of them, because they're Frank Lloyd Wright, they have like a big rock in the freaking living room. You know what I mean? So you couldn't set up a drum set, or you couldn't set up a mixing console or a recording console. So we finally found a big warehouse, like a big 10,000 square foot empty warehouse down in not a great area, quite honestly. It was south of downtown Phoenix. But the facility was great, and it had an upstairs, it had a lounge, and a kitchen, and all the stuff we needed. So that was there. And so Max Norman, Max is just an incredible guy. Not only makes great records, just musically and tune the things, and had this ability to really mold Megadeth, bring the best out of us. But he designed this whole studio on his computer through like an architectural CAD drawing program. He designed a control room, 2 isolation rooms, one for the drums, one for the vocal booth, and basically had a team of people who build sets out in Hollywood come out here to Phoenix and build this studio. So, and he was building that while we were at another studio here in Phoenix writing the music. So Max would come over every couple of days. He'd listen to the songs and make sure we were in tune with that. And one day he said to me, he goes, man, in his British accent, he goes, man, we got to get started on this record, man. Like we're going to be out of time, and we're going to run out of money. The budget will be gone. And I said, well, how much money do we have and how much time do we have? And he goes, man, time will always expand to fill the calendar, and however much money you have, you will spend it. So it was really a funny moment and I was thinking, God, you're right. If you got $100, you'll spend it. If you got $1 million, you'll spend it. Whatever you have. So, and same with time. So I think what was nice about Euthanasia is I remember, Countdown to Extinction was a very detailed record. You can hear it in the recording. It was every little. We listened to every little possible detail of it, and so much that when we started Euthanasia, we Max is like, we're not doing that again, man. No fucking way. We're not playing a record like that. You guys are gonna come in here, you're gonna know your parts, you're gonna know your songs, and you're gonna play together as a band. We're gonna take 3 takes. We'll pick the best one. We'll fix anything that we have to, and then we're gonna move on to the next song. So it was a very different mindset. And one of the things that I remember, Max was really big on is he goes, man, you really need to know your parts. Like, come in here as musicians. Don't just expect us, we can punch in, we can fix it. He goes, go home and practice. Like, know your parts, be committed. And it's funny, that record, I didn't listen to it a lot for many years, quite honestly. And honestly, Sean Drover, when he was playing drums in Megadeth, he would always talk about the record. And I think part of it was because of his age. He's a few years younger than me. And so he goes, man, that record that was really the sweet spot for Megadeth. And I'm like, really? So I started listening to it. Like when we were flying around the world, I'd put it on my headphones and I'd listen to it and I go, wow, we were friggin' good.
We were because, at the 10.
Yeah, because again, knowing we recorded it together, me, Dave, Marty, and Nick, we would record. Then Dave and Marty we'd pick the best of the 3 songs, of the 3 takes, I should say. That one has the best energy. Hey, there's a couple little bass flub, or hey, let's fix that little guitar note real quick. And then right away, Dave and Marty would double their tracks, and then we'd move on to the next song. Literally within a week, 7, 8, maybe 10 days, we had all the basic tracks done, because we do sometimes 2 or 3 songs a day. And that's, and it was fun. It was a very collaborative album. We had reached a point, you know, that was the second album that all four of us recorded on. I mean, Marty had been part of recording Rest in Peace, but he wasn't really there for the composing of the record. So this, you know, Euthanasia was the second full record that Marty and, you know, the four of us had really been a part of. And we were really thinking, operating like a band and composing and collaborative, and just, it was really just a beautiful moment for Megadeth.
So even though, you know, songs like Tout Le Monde or Reckoning Day are you know, the fan favorites, is there any like a guilty pleasure that you think that was overlooked on that record that maybe sort of fell down the wayside?
Man, I always thought Addicted to Chaos should have been a single. For whatever reason, the powers that be went with Train of Consequences, which is fine, you know. And then we quickly moved over to A Tout Le Monde. And unfortunately, A Tout Le Monde, MTV just flat out rejected it. They would not play it. They did not accept the video. And quite honestly, that was kind of the end of our era with MTV. And that was it. And of course, at that point, the Seattle music, you know, Pearl Jam and Nirvana and stuff was huge at that point. And that was it. I mean, Slayer certainly didn't get any more play. Anthrax, they kind of were finding their way. Of course, Metallica was big enough that they kind of just carved their way through it. But, you know, with haircuts and, you know, modified sound. And I mean, the 90s were a time for our genre, man. We were all, you know, trying to just find our way through it, you know, and fortunately our fans supported us, even when some of the bigger media didn't. You know, so that was a very interesting, you know, era. About 5-6 years there were very challenging for us. But, you know, again, I think, you know, for us with the big four, look, we all lived, we lived and survived and were able to, you know, to tell about it and live to fight another day. So the four of us, our bands, were very lucky with that.
One of the things I found out, you know, for instance, when I was listening to the Post Malone rework that you've done with the song Over Now, you know, when listening to some of your own stuff, is that there's difference in metal between people who just play their their band's music because that's what gives them money, you know, that's the reason to tour, to, you know, have a living, and people who are still metal fans and like metal and try, you know, going, you know, in different routes within the metal thing. I remember once, I think it was 2010, I was in Tempe, close to your home turf in Arizona, and you were at the one of those Rockstar Mayhem uproar things with Disturbed and Avenged Sevenfold or something like that. And I remember being surprised of finding you there, you know, listening to new bands, you know, as Disturbed or Avenged Sevenfold and stuff like that. Because then I saw that, you know, this guy likes metal. He's not just the bass player for Megadeth, you know, someone who could live all of his legacy, that you still like to go and discover and enjoy metal. So what are the bands that these days, you know, are still keeping you interested, if there are any?
You know, it's funny, there's a power metal band called Frozen Crown that I like. And it's interesting because there's this era right now of females got involved, guitar players, singers. You know, I think probably in the 2000s, Christina Scabia and Lacuna Coil kind of led the charge of you know, female-led acts, and that was very cool actually to see that happen. And you know, then the power metal thing got really popular. You know, it's funny, the Pantera record that I first came to know them on was an album they had called Power Metal, and it was funny. And they admittedly, it sounds kind of like a cross between Van Halen and Metallica. It was not as heavy as Vulgar Display.
That was hair metal.
Cowboys. It was, but I love it. It's my Pantera record, you know, and so I love that this power metal stuff, you know, some of the symphonic metal stuff I find very cool, and that's largely, you know, derivative out of Europe mostly, but I like it. Again, look, I go back, I still have my old Scorpions and Maiden records and my Kiss records and all that. I mean, you know, that's the stuff I grew up on, so when I hear it, it's familiar. It just takes me back to a different time in my life. You know, I had a good childhood growing up. I had good teenage years, putting bands together, touring around the Midwest of the United States before I moved to LA. After I graduated high school. So, I mean, I've been out gigging since I was, you know, 13 years old. You know, I've been out playing on stages. So, I think some of it is, again, just always sort of appreciating my past. And now sometimes with my professional ears on, go back and listen to those records and maybe sometimes the production isn't so great because it was the 70s, it was a different time, but sometimes then I'll go, God dang, man, these guys played good because they didn't have the technology to make them sound amazing in the studio. Like they really had to play. Like we're, just last week in the studio, because I sit here and record a lot. Just right over here, I record. I play in a lot of people's records. I got my own solo record that I'm working on, and I do some of it right from here. And I've fortunately been to the big dance, making big, major label records. So, when I get my studio ears on and I'm really listening to stuff and being very critical of it, you're kind of really scoping deep. You're really in the detail of things, and that's what I think was fun last week in Nashville. All of us really scoping deep in, and it was fun to be working on a new Megadeth record because we can go there. We can get as fucking detailed as we want because we can afford it, and we've got the best technology, we've got the best people working on it, so it's fun to do that. And then there's other times with some records where you're just like, you know what, man, this is just fucking plug and play, let's rock this shit, let's go. And that's okay too, because that's what the environment tells you is what it needs. And I think as a musician, and as a recording musician, as a recording artist, as a songwriter, you always need to pay attention to what's the room telling me, take social cues, what's the vibe. I got another record that I'm working on with some guys right now, and it's very much that. It's kind of this sort of Cheap Trick, kind of thing or something. And like when me and Frank Bello work, we do that, our stuff, we plug and play. And I think one of the fun things with me and Frank when we do Altitudes and Attitude is we amaze each other at what we come up with when we're not in Megadeth and Anthrax, when we just sort of take those hats off and go, let's just let her roll. Let's just see what happens. And it's just like, wow, I never knew you could play like that. Wow, I never knew you could sing like that, And so it's fun to be amazed in the process of making music. And so as a listener to the fans that buy our records and listen to our stuff, just know that while we're making this music, we're as amazed as you are when you hear it, hopefully, and hopefully you hear that when it comes out of your speakers.
People is very asking a lot about the new record, the new Megadeth record. Of course, given the whole pandemic thing and blah blah blah, of course, all plans have been postponed, or things have been pushed back to 2021. Right. What is the time frame you're working with at the moment? Maybe a fall. I think that also in the fall you have your own record coming up. So, right. Which are the time frames in mind?
Well, my business partner Tom Hazard, who's also the singer in my solo band, in my Ellefson solo band, it's funny. A few months ago, he just said, he goes, I think October's the time to put the record out, and he's very instinctual, and he just put that out there, and I said, geez, now with the pandemic and all the shutdown, I said, God, October is probably the best time. Obviously I got to sort of play traffic cop a little bit because when Megadeth ramps up and we go, then I need the runway to be clear, for all things Megadeth. But look, there's enough time in life to do all this stuff, and, with Megadeth, I mean, for sure, it'll be next year, it'll be 2021. And this is it's a good time right now for us to be working on a new Megadeth album because there's nothing else going on. And I think, look, we've made records like the 13 record, which is the first one that I was a part of when I returned back to the band in 2010. We literally had 10 weeks to write, record, mix, and be done with this record because we were in between tours. We had some big 4 shows coming up. We had the Mayhem Tour, that Rockstar Mayhem Tour you're talking about. That was coming up. And we literally had 10 weeks. And there's an energy about that record that I love. It was fun. It was exciting. It was exciting for me and Dave to be playing together again and making a new record together. And so, that was one setting. This is a very different setting. This is a record that just by its nature is taking a few years. And listening to what we have now, it's well worth the wait. Trust me.
So I'd like to know, there's this thing that pops up, every now and then, which is your supposed audition with Metallica at a couple of points in their history, and
Right.
Mustaine actually giving the blessing and all that stuff. So can you? Sorry, I just drifted away for a second.
So you brought that topic up, and the internet froze up.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Look, there, was a discussion of it, but look, I never got the call for it. I'm friends with the Metallica guys. I've always gotten along very well with them. They've been very gracious to me. They're cool guys. Obviously, I've known Robert, pre-Metallica, back when he was in Suicidal Tendencies, and he was on tour with us back in 1992, I guess, when he and Jimmy DeGrasso were in Suicidal and they were out on tour with us. So I've known Robert a long time. And, certainly deserving of that gig. I mean, Robert has paid his dues, and he's just a phenomenal player and helps make the band sound amazing. I mean, when we were doing those big 4 shows, it was just like, man, I'd be backstage and I'd be hearing the band. And Robert is just a, phenomenal player and a phenomenal player in that band. So I'd say they made the right choice, with that. But it's interesting. I did do one thing. I actually sat down and learned a couple of Metallica songs because I'd never learned. I listened to them, and I'm a fan. I like their records, especially the earlier stuff. No Life Till Leather is the first Metallica stuff I heard when I met Dave. They hadn't even recorded Kill 'Em All, or I guess maybe they were recording Kill 'Em All when I met Dave. So I got to sort of hear Kill 'Em All against No Life Till Leather, which was the demo that eventually, led up to Kill 'Em All. So that kind of, for me, is sort of always a favorite time for me of Metallica. And then, of course, everything up probably, kind of through the Black Album. Because it was always around, because we were making records, and in a lot of ways, maybe we were not, I guess in some ways we were competing for some of the same space, but it was a time when our bands were both growing together, but I'd never sat down with bass in hand and just kind of learned a Metallica song. And I started listening to some stuff, especially on the Black Album. And I was just like, man, the way James phrases his lyrics over his riffs is so different than how Dave phrases his, lyrics and the phrasing of his singing over his riffs. And it was so funny. I was just thinking, God, these two guys used to be in a band together, and for as similar as our bands are in one way, and we're both, pillars of a, founders of a genre, and, pillars in a genre. It's just that, where Metallica went and where Dave went and Megadeth went, there was just sort of this departure. And I always say, I mean, as a result, we've got 2 great bands, so, it's, and of course, working with Dave, very, intimately on Megadeth music, it's just very cool how there's just these two bands have just thrived in their own plane, over the last, 30, almost 40 years now. 37 years of Megadeth, I think literally like this week. I think it was literally this week, June of 1983, when I met Dave in Hollywood, and we started Megadeth like a couple weeks later. That was when the name came up and we started rehearsing.
What was your first thought when meeting Dave? What was the first thing that crossed your mind?
I felt he was dangerous.
He still is.
It's funny. Here, I'll tell you this. And I mean, look, Dave. As soon as I met him, which was literally knocking on his door to ask for some cigarettes, and because I was 18, and me and my friends from Minnesota, we were 18 years old, and we were really looking for beer. So then we knocked again and asked, where do we get beer? And then we bought beer together and everything. Life was good, the founding of Megadeth. And but yeah, I mean, he definitely, you could tell he was the real deal, and he did have an air of, of like, who are you? I'm going to fucking kick your ass. You know what I mean? And that very much, came across him. And, there's a part of that charm that's who he is. And it's like, God, I hope he never loses it. I mean, Dave's mellowed in his age, and, he's matured, of course, and you know, he's a grown up now. But you know, there is that part of, even when I was with him last week, I was like, God, I don't ever want you to lose that edge. You know, as much as that keeps everyone else on edge, there's a part of him that's just sort of his internal being, you know, and you know, so, but yeah, it's been quite a journey. It's really been, you know, it's really been great, you know.
How does one go from you know, one of the top metal bands in the world to brewing coffee? Because you have this coffee entrepreneurship thing going on with your own brand. So how did you make the? It was offered to you. You had a pretty special interest because you were a big coffee lover. You know, how does David Ellefson go? You know, through the
Sure.
Through that.
Well, everybody needs coffee. You know, I've been drinking coffee. Yeah, it's funny. I drink coffee. I think I went on a trip for like my church or something when I was a kid, and I drank coffee because I had to wake up really early. And all I just remember is it just had to make me pee all day. I hated it. You know, I didn't like the taste of it. I'm like, well, why would anybody drink this? You know, because my parents drank it, of course. And so I didn't drink it for many years. And then when I moved to LA, our first drummer, Dijon Carruthers, who was playing drums with us and actually composed some of the lyrics to Black Friday. That was actually his inspiration on the Peace Sells album. He was a big coffee guy. He had quit taking drugs and didn't party anymore, and he just drank coffee. So he was a big Deep Purple and Judas Priest fan. So I'd sit in his apartment and we'd listen to like Les Banks and Cozy Powell and all these, you know, drummers and Ian Pace and stuff. So he kind of got me the coffee bug, quite honestly. And so fast forward many years, I guess 2016-ish, maybe 15 or 16, something like that. I was on a cruise. I was on the Shiprock cruise, and a production assistant who had worked for Megadeth was on the cruise, and she pulled me over one day at the beach and says, "Hey, I need to introduce you to this, my friend Paul, who plays in Paul Wagoner, who plays guitar in Between the Buried and Me." Yep. And he and his wife have a coffee business. I think you'd be you guys would, you know, there might be something there, you know. So I ended up calling him. She kept bugging me. Hey, you need to call Paul. So I called him one day, and we were just, it was like we talked about coffee, how, you know, like how you and me are talking about music right now. It was just an instant connection, and we talked about beans and roast and flavors. And so he said, I'll send you some coffee. Let's see what we can do. And my favorite coffee is the Indonesian Sumatra stuff that comes from the Sumatra region. That's probably my favorite coffee. So I said, I want something that tastes like that. And initially he had some Brazilian beans, but my experience with the beans that I had from Brazil were not really good. It was not really good coffee. So I said, impress me, like make it good. And he said, I trust me, you'll like it. And so he sent me the stuff, and it was great. And I called my partner, Tom, and I just said, hey, I had this call about doing a coffee thing. And he goes, great, we'll call it the Ellefson Coffee Company, and our first coffee will be called Roast in Peace. And we just had a laugh. We didn't even think anything of it. And next thing you know, he calls his girlfriend Melody, who does our design work for us. Next thing you know, they've got a whole Roast in Peace label in a bag and Ellefson coffee, and it was up on the internet like later that day. I'm like, good Lord, man. But that's that's my friendship with Tom. He's like that. He we'll talk just like this, and ideas come up, and so next thing you know, bang, Ellefson Coffee Company was formed, and we started just online, which we still have, and that's we've got a location back in my little farm, my hometown in Jackson, Minnesota. But I've also partnered. We got a partnership down in South America, in Brazil. We do some coffee there. I've got a roaster now over in the UK, so we can service Europe. And then you're getting in touch with all kinds of other things. How does Brexit affect the coffee business? Can you import? Can you send coffee to Europe? You know what I mean? So some of these things that happen in the world that you think wouldn't affect you, now all of a sudden it's like, geez, well, now it affects my coffee business. So I like it. I like having my hands in a lot of different stuff, and it's all in the name of rock and roll. Quite honestly, that's the point of it. It's not like, oh, I'm over here, I'm a music guy, and over here I'm this business guy. It's like, no, they're all one. They're all part of the same guy here.
You do also a lot of charity work with your foundation. So I'd like to know, what's the main reasoning behind it, what you're trying to achieve, and tell me a little bit about your charity work.
Sure. Well, in back in when we first launched our Ellefson coffee store back in Jackson, Minnesota, it was big news. It was a big thing, and right across the border where I grew up, like 20 minutes to the south of Jackson, Minnesota, is the state of Iowa, the border line. And the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had reached out to me, and they wanted to induct me into their Hall of Fame, and which I thought was very sweet and kind of them. And I a lot of my young years as a teenager, I played the ballrooms and various play clubs and things around Iowa, as well as Minnesota and South Dakota. And so I was super honored by it. And we went back there to get. I have the plaque here, so I think it was 2017, and that started, or no, 2018, I guess, and that started the whole thought process, which led to the mayor of Jackson, Minnesota, had proclaimed David Ellefson Day, official David Ellefson. I got my own day now on October 9th. In my little town there. And so I thought, listen, again, more wonderful, kind things, but how can we use that day as a platform for something bigger that would give back to the community? And that was when I came up with the idea to have this foundation. And so between me and Tom and another board member that we have back in Jackson, we put together the David Ellefson Youth Music Foundation. And the whole point of that is to continue to bolster music programs in both the private sector and also in public music, public schools. And oftentimes here in the U.S., especially when budget cuts come in the school, the arts and the music programs are one of the first ones to get cut. And I am a product of the public school music education program. I mean, I started with tenor saxophone at age, in the 5th grade. And I played in concert band and marching band and pep band. And once I took up the bass, I started playing in jazz band. So I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you if it wasn't for the public education, music school systems. So, so we've been able to now, especially this year with the pandemic shutdown, we really were able to have a season here where we were able to do some things to raise funds. We started the Schools Out initiative where we can now give free music lessons to students all around the world. We've got a bunch of great people: Jimmy DeGrasso, Dirk Verburen, Kiko, Nita Strauss, all kinds of different people giving free lessons, to students all around the world who are out of school now because of the COVID-19 shutdown. So, it's really been a wonderful journey. Winning these awards, the grant, we're part of the Grammy Music Education Coalition. So, it's interesting that the success from Megadeth, Dystopia, to win the Grammy, get inducted into the Hall of Fame in Iowa. It's been really a blessing to use those big moments as platforms to be able to, to go out and do some things to give back to the world, to give back to the music community, and especially to give encouragement to young musicians, and especially at this point in time when everybody needed some encouragement this year.
We have this section in Metal Hammer called Tour Live, which is about the happenings of musicians live on tour. And I'll give you a different set of questions if you will. And the first one would be, what's a person or thing that you find the hardest to say goodbye when you go out on tour?
Oh, for sure, my family.
Someone said to me a pasta machine, so that sets the bar.
Well, for sure, my family, and I'll just say family because that includes my wife, my son, my daughter, my 2 cats. I remember years ago when my son Roman was first born. He was born in February of 1996, and we were scheduling to get started writing the Cryptic Writings album. So he was born in February. I think we started in March to start to write the record, and then we went to Nashville maybe around July or August to start recording. And I tell you, those 3 weeks I was in Nashville recording that record, man, I have never experienced the love for another human being like that you have with your kids. I mean, that is just a whole other level. I was literally, my heart was aching. I had like a heartbreak for my son. I couldn't wait to get back home to see my son. And I did, and I came home, and he was just a little, singing just a teeny little baby, But I came home, and when he saw me, my wife and son came down to pick me up at the airport, and when he saw me, he like looked at me and like went, "Oh my God, there's that guy again!" And he just like clamped onto me like a panda bear, and he'd never let go. And every time I would leave to go on tour, the following year during the Cryptic Writings tour, he would just freak. He would cry. He'd walk around the house, "Where's Daddy?" And that was rough, man. That was a really tough. That was a tough couple of years to be on tour. And then my daughter was born after that, and so being away from my kids during that period was one of the hardest seasons of tour life for me. And now they're bigger and they're grown up and they're college educated, and my son just graduated with his MBA, and my daughter's a nursing student, and so it's but still and now I guess when we do tour, obviously they can come out and we can travel around and we can see each other. So. My poor cat, my cats, they just go, "Where'd that guy go?" And then I miss them because they're getting older too. So I miss my cats when I travel.
But cats don't care, you come back home and they're looking at, that's that guy there again,
Yeah. Well, my one cat, he's kind of the same thing. I come home and he's just at my side all the time. He's like, "Yay, he's home," So
these two are a bit more dependent. I have these little doggies here, which are always with me.
There you go.
Yep. And about, it's like, pandemonium with them. It's like I go out for 5 minutes and it's drama. But
he's at your side. Yeah.
So, what's the biggest show you've done, and what was the amount of people there? Probably it was the Poland thing where you did the Big Four thing.
Well, the Poland Big Four was big. Rock in Rio in 1991 was the biggest. That was 140,000 people. That was the biggest one that we've ever played to. And that's, there's so, and even like in Poland and we played the Castle Donington in 1988. That was 107,000 people. I mean, you can't even see the end of the crowd. I mean, it's just people as far, I always say you can kind of start to see the curve of the earth before you see the end of the people,
Yeah.
But it's as much as there's people right up front, you can see, and the Download Festival, which is Castle Donington essentially now, up in the UK, that's one of the big ones. So is Hellfest, Grass Pop, some of these festivals. I mean, geez, there's like 80-some thousand people there, and it's just so big, and there's so many people down there. My thing when I'm performing is it's great to see people losing their minds and they're just into it. And, and right in the front, you can still see the whites of their eyes and all that. And then it's just kind of, as it goes back, it's almost like a painting, But, I guess my concern is always, I just hope people stay safe, and, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a dad, maybe it's because I'm a little older. Maybe it's because I played to some shows where it's gotten rowdy. It's so tame now compared to what it used to be. Back in when Megadeth first started, oh my God, I mean, it was like a punk rock show. There's people throwing stuff on stage and people jumping on stage and jumping off the stage, and it was very interactive. And of course, things are much more corporate now in the touring business, and no one wants a lawsuit or some of that stuff, which is probably good. It's good that there's an energy about the live show, but hopefully people don't get. I mean, look, we say a prayer every night before we go on stage. I'm often the guy that gets, tasked with doing it, and that's usually one of my prayers is, Lord, just keep the audience safe tonight. Keep everybody safe so they can have a great time in the name of heavy metal.
Well, that Castle Donington gig was pretty famous because of that. It was 2 people dying on the front row while Guns N' Roses were playing.
Exactly.
And that kind of pestered them and followed them for many years. Actually, that made the Donington thing limit the capacity. It was to 72,000 people or something like that, just because of that whole thing happening on. But on the other hand, what has been the smallest show you've ever played, and how many people were there?
Jeez, you know what it is? I think probably St. Vitus in New York, which is a little bar out in Brooklyn, and I literally think it. I think I'd be generous if it said it holds 150 people.
Yeah.
Maybe, and we, yeah, because, even from the very beginning, we would play 500-seat clubs, which were big, and we'd sell them out, and for a band that didn't have a record out and, was kind of on Dave's fame from being in Metallica in 1984 and 85 and stuff, until we started putting albums out. We always packed the house, so we've been pretty lucky that we are that band. But yeah, I'd say probably St. Vitus, and that was 2000. I think that was 2016. I think when we did that, it was December 2016, and of course at that point Megadeth is very famous, and so to cram all of our, cram into a little tiny club like that. But it's a notorious rock bar, and it was fun, man. And they absolutely, of course, limited how many people could come in, but that was one of the fun ones.
So you prefer the flying, sort of situation with festivals? You just go there for, a couple of days, go back to your base city or whatever, or you prefer the tour bus situation where you have your little, tiny universe for a couple of months?
They're both okay. It's always thrilling to kind of just sort of fly in like rock stars and walk up on stage and just destroy the place and leave. I'm not gonna lie, that's fun. But at the same time, I think probably the main thing on tour is and the tour bus, for instance, will give you this, is to sort of have your some consistency, because your toothbrush is in a new location every day. You know what I mean? Every day is a new crowd, a new stage, a new bed, a new hotel. Everything's different all the time. So I think, especially as you get more seasoned and you've been doing this like a while, like we have, I think we're always trying to sort of control the environment and the elements to just sort of make it as kind of give you a home base at all times, whether it be a tour bus or it be a sort of, hotel or some region where you're sort of basing out of.
So what's the thing that a fan should never do if he wants an autograph or a selfie? What's the thing that fets you up the most, when dealing with fans? If they are, screaming in your ear or, or being too much in your face, especially in these times of social distancing. What's the thing that usually, you put the limit there?
Try not to have bad breath.
Yeah, that's usually the thing.
Chew some gum. We're pretty good about all of it. I especially me. I try to make myself pretty available. You can't say hello to everybody, but I do my best, and I think in Megadeth we try to do our best. But and I get it. Look, you're losing your mind. You're meeting your hero. I get it. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's like, look, we can't sign all 55 of your albums. We've literally I can put one signature, and then you got to move on. And I think it's probably one of the fun things, especially down in places like South America, where it's Beatlemania for Megadeth down there. And the fans, they see you in the airport about a hotel, and they're like, oh my God, please sign. And you're just kind of like, dude, I've signed 3 things for you. That's all I can do. Like, there's 300 more people here, So, it is what it is. I love it. I think the fascination of it is fun. I try, there's a saying, of course, don't never meet your heroes, because you never know what kind of, are they going to be cool or are they going to be a jerk? So I try to, in my mind, remember that little interaction, which might be just 5 seconds, 10 seconds, that is a moment they're going to take away forever, and who you are in that moment is who they're going to remember you as they go home and listen to your records again. They're going to bring that moment back. And if you're a jerk to them, that
you'll be a jerk forever.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a little bit of that. Be careful about meeting your heroes,
So what's the last thing that you do before going on stage? Your little ritual, in a way.
Well, I always do some music warm-ups, do some vocal warm-ups. Make sure I pee, because it might be an hour and a half before you're able to take a leak, right? So don't drink too much coffee before you go on stage. we always say, put the in-ears in, right? They usually do that walking to the stage. But the one for sure thing is always pray before you go on stage. Always pray, because the Creator gave us the opportunity. The Creator created the music through us. We are His creation. We're just creating for Him, and ultimately it's His concert. They're His songs. These are His people, and we're just a vessel and an instrument to go out and do His will. So make sure you pray and go out and do His will.
So what's the first thing that you do when you get off the stage? I guess take a leak again, or
yeah. Hey, some nights, if it's hot out, you're drinking a ton of water. The funny thing is, you can't really drink a lot of water on stage, especially if you're singing, because you don't want to eat too close to showtime.
You get reflux.
Especially because the main thing is for singing. For singing purposes, you really gotta kind of just really have your body's kind of it's like a string on a piano. It's just one big long string, usually getting off the stage, I love it to just be quiet, because you sort of spend your whole day is about that 60 or 90 minutes you're on that stage. Everything in your whole day leading up to that point is about that. Your sleep, your diet, your exercise, your warm up, how much you talk, everything you do is ramped for that moment. And so when that moment's over, there's sort of this, elation and excitement. You're buzzing, and to come backstage and go into the dressing room. Sometimes we don't even talk to each other. We decided we don't criticize anything at the show for at least 30 minutes. Just cool down, just we kind of go our separate ways, or we'll just sit. And sometimes I'll, probably one of the first things I do is I take a shower. Just take a shower and just cool off, and but I don't know, by taking a shower, it sort of washes the Superman off, and then you kind of take the game face off, and then you can just kick back and become David again.
And last, to end the interview, what's the most glamorous thing that you remember doing while being a musician? It can be, the flying privately, or flying off to a private island, to record a record, whatever you remember.
I think winning the Grammy was the most sort of celebrated celebrity thing. To go, because we've been to the Grammys a lot. We've been nominated 11 times. I've been to quite a few of them, and not one. And when you don't win, that's it. It's over. And then you just hang out, enjoy the concert, or go home. And it's a great show. I mean, they do a great job. But, to win, and then you go up on the stage and you accept that award, there is a moment where you just go, wow, this is everything I've watched on TV my whole life, since I was a kid. And there you are. And it's a very surreal moment. It's a surreal moment when they actually say you won. And the Grammy goes to, Megadeth. And it's like, wow. Because at that moment, the whole world is watching you, and only you, for those moments. And then after that, you go backstage, and they had a little Grammy.com camera and say something, to your fans. And then you go back and take a picture with some of the board members, the top brass of the Grammys. And then to be escorted back to what they call the winner's circle. That was a cool moment, to be in the winner's circle, and you're just like, wow, this is where the elite get to go, the Beyoncés and Elton John, and, the Sting, and, the top of the top, the best of the best. And that was a really exciting, exhilarating, and also very humbling moment, I mean, and I think at that moment I looked at Dave and I just go, geez, we're just like couple of heavy metal guys. What the hell are we doing, and they let us back here, so, I think a lot of it was kind of the fun of knowing our journey. And I think for me, I felt like I was taking all of our fans there. It's like, oh my God, come here quick, look at this. Can you believe this? It's kind of like we made it. It wasn't just Megadeth. It was all of us, all million fans, everybody. We all made it. Metal Hammer, we all get to be here. They recognized us, you know, the hellion troublemaker little freaking heavy metal guys and girls that we are, like they gave us the thumbs up, you know. So that one still ranks up there as probably the top one.
Okay, David. So that's pretty much all.
Cool.
We're done for today. You can go rest and play your bass and brew some coffee. So we'd like to thank you so much for this interview, which you will be able to read on Metal Hammer shortly. And you know, just the best of luck with all your ventures and businesses, and hope to see you on the road sometime soon. Okay.
Thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it. Say hello to everybody. I see the comments coming up. So hello, everybody. See ya.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Take care, man.
Bye.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.